Welcome back to another architecture video. Today we're talking about efficient house additions, specifically to this house. Let's zoom in. This was my neighbor's place. Actually, it still is my neighbor's place. And this is from a few years ago, but I was basically out here cutting the grass and talking to my neighbor, and he's got a growing family. I think he had 5 kids at the time, and basically they were outgrowing this house. Right, it's too small. They had to put an addition onto it. They didn't want to move. Um, they liked the neighborhood and whatnot. So what they wanted to do was put an addition right here. Didn't know what that was going to look like. Just kind of casually said, "Hey, we're thinking about doing something there." He knew that I was an architect. Said, "Hey, maybe you can kind of give me some ideas." I said, "Yeah, absolutely." He's a good guy. I wanted to help him out. So effectively, what I did was kind of did some early schematic design work. Full transparency, I didn't do this project for him. I just kind of gave him a very rudimentary set of sketches early on to sort of point him in the right direction, or not even point him, just kind of illustrate what his options are. And we'll see those in a second. So this is where we're starting from. This is our jumping off point. Next steps. Quickly model this in 3D in Rhino, and as you can see, this is basically the front of the house facing the street. This is where we're talking about the addition, right? Somewhere in here. We don't know exactly what that looks like, but this side of the house. And now, budget was a factor in this project. Basically, we didn't want to touch the existing house like as much as possible. Any money that we spent over here really was coming away from money over here to be spent on the actual project, right? So effectively, it was important to limit the amount of work that we're doing here on this existing portion of the house. So keep that in mind. That's a kind of a driving force. We basically had a budget that we couldn't go beyond. So it was important to consider things like this existing roof. This is the side view. If we could just kind of not touch this roof, that's a lot of money saved, right? As opposed to maybe we have to take that roof off and replace it. That's money coming directly out of the addition. Here's a view from the sort of back corner of the house. And you can see the addition would come out this way here. Who knows what that looks like, but that's kind of roughly the space that we have to work with. And this is kind of a nice overhead view. Actually, this is a sort of a nice one to start with. This is sort of the footprint. We have a little rear addition at the back here. Probably going to keep this. This is kind of like a little front entry mudroom kind of a situation. And again, trying to keep this existing roof if we can. So, and same thing down back here. I don't think ultimately this little back addition got touched, and that was an important factor. Like this here was the original kind of building, if you can imagine, brick building. This was clearly an addition. This was clearly an addition at the back, and you can see it stretches the whole sort of length of the back of the house there. So anyway, looking from the top, this is what we're working with, but he didn't know where to start, right? Keeping in mind, again, he wanted as much space as possible. He wanted a new, basically a garage for their vehicle, which they did not have. Master bedroom for themselves. So basically a two-story addition over here, trying to limit the amount of work that they're doing to the existing building, right? Just another quick flash of what we're working with. You can see front addition, rear addition kind of poking around the corner. This whole deck was to be removed, and I think the driveway actually updated so they could drive right into the garage. So anyway, that's where we're starting from. I quickly modeled it up in 3D so I could have something to sketch over and be consistent with what I was showing him, and here we go. So I sent him a bunch of options and just said, hey, I don't want to steer you in any particular direction, but at least I want to sort of give you directions that you could go, just to let him know what the possibilities were, what the pros and cons were of these possibilities too. I think that was important with each one of these little roof. I basically called them different roof options because they're all 2 stories. They're a little bit different maybe in their floor areas and things, but we're going to talk about that in the pros and cons. So option one was, hey, keep it super simple. We'll do a flat roof. That gives you 2 stories, right? You get 1 story. Second story, you'd have a floor plate in there somewhere. I'm just going to go to a smaller pen size here. There we go. That's a little better. So, flat roof. they're pretty industrial. It doesn't look great, but it would sort of suit the needs because you can basically run it right over. This is your new roof. You run it right over to the existing roof, and again, you're basically not touching the existing building, right? You're punching through in a couple spots. Obviously, you're touching the existing building, but you're really limiting the amount of work that you're doing. This is all new, but then you can basically keep all the existing stuff, right? Um, so you're keeping the existing. That's a pro. Pretty cost effective. Little ugly. There we go. Not the most visually appealing design. I was flowery in how I worded that and saying, "Hey, it's ugly, but it's cheap." Essentially, is what I was saying. And I did say also that this is a little bit less desirable for water and snow, and that's actually a big factor. They get a ton of snow, and this is a little town in sort of southwestern northern Ontario. And in the winter, they can get a few feet of snow, in a day, no problem. Then it gets wet, blah blah blah. It gets super heavy, so that's snow load is a consideration. So anyway, didn't love this one, but hey, this is the cheap option. Option two, we have this kind of long sloping shed roof. Again, looks kind of hideous in this angle. But when you look at it from the front, it's maybe a little better than this. It kind of keeps some of the angles. This is the existing building, obviously, and you're keeping some of the sloped gable look. But you are starting to effectively touch the existing roof, right? Because this is basically new here. You're putting more new roof on the old building, right? So this second little portion that I'm hatching, that's existing building, but it's got a new roof. So you're spending money there that is coming out of the addition. But it's simple in terms of framing and stuff like that. Pretty effective at shedding rain and snow. It's all going to come off the side, so that's easy. You still get your sort of 2 stories. You have your garage entrance in this way. What did I say in terms of pros and cons? Minimal impact to the existing structure and roof, which is fair. You're extending the new roof over top, but you possibly could build it actually on top of the existing roof and not touch it that much. I mean, maybe you pull off the shingles, you connect the attic spaces to give it some venting and some airflow, things like that. But just a different look to sort of a similar situation. All right, option three. What do we have here? We have getting into some more of a sort of gable roof. And this one certainly looks better, right? You can imagine from the front, and I sort of gave him two options with this one. I said, hey, you can do a very simple sort of gable on the front, with sort of the flat side facing the front, or if you want to spend a little more money, you add an additional smaller gable facing front. Would really sort of break up that visual plane. This whole visual facade would look quite a bit better, I would say, when you do that. Because instead of just this plain roof that's facing the street, right, you kind of get this little triangle shape with a nice little window in there that sort of mimics what's going on here, right? You're taking this shape and you're kind of duplicating it a little. You're paying a little bit of homage to the existing building, and it's just a nicer treatment of the building. It looks more seamless. It looks less like an addition. This looks a lot more cohesive as a building. Certainly more complicated when you get into the roofing, because you have the existing building here, right? And now you're building some new roof onto it. It's got a ridge, some sloping to the back, some sloping to the front. Maybe you add that extra gable. Little bit more work, and you're potentially losing a bit of space at the back here, in terms of the second floor, right? Because imagine this is your floor plate separating your main floor from your second floor. As you slope back, like getting back here, your headroom from the floor, you can imagine that it's not much, right? You're starting to lose some space, so you might be compromising some floor area if you do this one. Looks nice from the street. It makes for a really nice looking house, but you might be making a bit of compromise at the back. Whereas, like, consider these two. You got a very gentle slope coming out this way so that you get the full 2 stories. And certainly the same thing here when you have the flat roof. You get a full 2 stories for this whole portion, right? So those are kind of the benefits of those. So what did I say here for pros and cons of this style? Minimal impact to the existing structure and roof. Yes, but it's a little more complicated in and of itself as the addition. Good approach for water and snow. Definitely better than some of the other ones. The water has less distance to travel. The snow is going to kind of slough off a little bit. Visually ties the old and new portions together, and one of the best looking options. And that's kind of what we just talked about, right? Is like this really ties the addition and the new, sorry, the addition and the old part of the house together. Just makes it look a lot more cohesive, like an actual house that was maybe all built at the same time. A little bit less like a Frankenstein, where you're adding these pieces on over time, and it becomes a little bit muddled over time. But anyway, starting to probably get in a little more pricey side compared to the other two. Um, Optional dormer would add some cost. You're adding a handful of peaks and valleys, and the valleys are not really a concern, but there's something to think about in this case, right? Because you have maybe I'll go just clean up this roof plan. Whoops, delete those. Because you're adding a valley here and you're adding a valley here, and every time you do that, it's a potential spot for water to build up and cause leaks, right? Because if this whole roof's covered in snow, it melts a little bit, it becomes wet, and then freezes again, then you start having the possibility for ice damming. The water can kind of get in underneath the shingles there, but not a huge concern, but just, I don't know, something to keep in mind. Um, I like that one. Visually, that one looks great. Next, I sent him this one, kind of as a not as a joke, but just to say, hey, like if you really want to go out there, like you can do a lot of stuff with this project. And this is sort of the barn roof style. Um, and actually, I don't mind it. Now that I'm looking at it again, it's not horrible, right? Because let's look at the elevation here. This is your front elevation. You can imagine the existing house as it was, kind of like this. And you're effectively adding this left-hand side, this new addition with the garage, but you're putting a roof over the whole thing. You're not leaving that existing roof. You're adding a whole new roof. So you're tearing this chunk off and putting on a big one instead. So that's certainly more expensive, right? But there are some advantages because you're starting to tie this together from a visual perspective from the street. This is looking kind of cohesive, like a single house that wasn't, a house with an addition 100 years later, because you have one nice straight, I shouldn't say straight, one continuous roof line, and it's kind of that barn style. And you can see when you cut that in section how you would do it. Maybe this is the old house, 2 stories. This was the roof, but you rip that off and you just replace it with this new truss, right? That just spans the whole roof. So it'd be actually pretty easy to construct. Certainly more expensive though. You're doing way more work to the house, and if we go back to some of these other examples where you're barely even touching the existing roof, this one certainly a little more expensive. Really effective in terms of like water and snow and stuff like that though, because now we talked about those valleys over here. With this barn style, you have no valleys. There would be a little area of concern kind of in here where this barn roof is sort of over top of this lower roof, right? Which is, go back to this, that's this roof right here, right? So your barn roof would be something like this coming over, something like that, right? So then there is a slight area like in here where you have a valley, but um, pretty effective in terms of snow and rain and actually doing the job of a roof and again tying the building together so it looks cohesive, but definitely getting into more of the pricey side. Substantial cost of renovation work, totally. Large impact on the existing second floor because you're ripping the roof off. I don't think you could live in this house during this renovation. Where some of these other ones, you could live there and be doing the renovation at the same time, which again was a consideration when you factor in the cost and stuff. They couldn't just move out to a hotel for 6 months. They needed to live in the house during this time. That was my impression. It would certainly save some money. Um, so that's a huge con for this one. And this is an interesting one. Would it need to extend the height of the front brick wall? Now, maybe that's hard to sort of visualize, but let's go back to this image here. So this is the existing house. So again, your addition is over here to the left. But with this roof, instead of bringing it down right away, you're bringing it up, and this actually becomes kind of the high point, and then you bring it back down over here, and then your outline starts to look something like this. So all of a sudden, like this is sort of the outline of your house, right? But you have this little triangle, and it's not little, it's pretty big. That's effectively new facade on this house. So it would look super strange, like if this is all your addition, but then that little triangle right here, I'll just delete that. That little triangle, if that's not brick to match this brick here, I think that would look super funny. It would definitely look like an addition. So that was just something I wanted to bring up. It's like, hey, with this sort of approach, you're gonna have a weird little condition right here where you're gonna have to. It doesn't have to be brick, but you're gonna have to extend this wall upwards just to fill that in. It's kind of a false wall, but anyway, a funny little consideration, but um, might have been missed. Just when you're sort of glancing at it, that would be kind of like this chunk right here, right? Basically building an extension to your front wall. So anyway, barn style. Some people are into that. Some people aren't. Whatever. Doesn't really matter to me, but just an option. Next, similar to the barn style, is this sort of mansard style roof, which is I generally don't love it. It's kind of a combination of like a flat roof combined with a gable roof a little bit, right? Because if you just had a gable, you have this peak, but it's like you're cutting the top of the peak off, right? So that this part doesn't exist, and you're flattening it off and basically having a flat roof on top of that. But it can work, and in this case, it's similar to the barn style because you'd be ripping off the existing peak, so that's gone, and you're adding a big truss over the whole thing again. So again, very impactful to the existing building, the existing second floor. Probably couldn't live there during this renovation. But visually would tie the building together pretty nicely. So then again, it looks like a nice cohesive project that was meant to be pretty effective from like a functional point of view and shedding rainwater, snow, that kind of stuff. You can kind of see with these arrows, you're effectively pushing stuff in every direction. You do have kind of a semi-flat portion on the top there, which is whatever. It's not great, like I talked about with the flat roof, but it's not really a huge concern. You can certainly deal with it. I've seen houses like this before. Um, Visually, do I love it? No. Let's be honest, I don't love it. But it's better than some other ones, right? Like this looks like a pretty cohesive house compared to I don't know, this one I don't love it. This one really don't love it. Right? If you just as an elevation, as a house, as a building, don't love this. Don't love this. It's a little is it a little better? I don't know. Maybe that's worse actually. Don't love it. This is certainly looking more like a house, more of a traditional house. This one here, I visually this one's my favorite for sure. The barn style, I mean, it could work, whatever. This one, don't love it. What do we have for pros and cons? New roof throughout. That is a bit of a pro actually, because you have an old roof on there. Hey, if you rip it off and put on something completely brand new, then it's not something you have to worry about. You get new insulation basically over the whole roof, so your heating bills and cooling bills and stuff would be a little bit better because instead of just replacing the insulation, I shouldn't say replacing, instead of just adding new insulation over the addition, you're adding new insulation over the whole thing. So that's kind of a bonus. That'll save you some money in the long run in terms of energy efficiency and things like that. Visually ties them together. Talked about that. Again, super suitable in terms of the first and second floor because you kind of have a flat roof, right? So you don't have this sort of crunched headroom at the back, and that's actually a nice bonus of this one too. And you could actually that I didn't mention that. This is a maybe I didn't even mention that here. You can have a really high roof. I should say, oh, I did. You could raise the ceiling heights of I said second floor of the existing building. So actually, we didn't touch on that because you can have a really high roof, or I should say ceiling, in the second floor of the addition. But you could also add a higher ceiling to the second floor of the existing building too. So that's kind of a nice bonus if you wanted to renovate the second floor of the main part of the house. There, you really could raise the ceiling heights up. So Kind of a bonus of that barn style. Um, what do we got here? This is the last one, and this one I kind of said, I think I gave him this one as an option if he was really short on funding, and if it turned out when they got some pricing back from contractors and things like that, they weren't going to be able to do the full project. This was an option that's kind of a little bit of a give and take. It's a compromise because you get the addition, you get your garage on the front there, you can drive the car in. Um, you get a two-story addition for half of it. So this becomes two stories, and you have a one-story addition at the back. So you lose a little bit of floor area, but you kind of get the master bedroom up here. You get your garage. I think this is an extension of the kitchen at the back. So you sort of get most of what you want if funds were getting tight, if the budget was getting a little tight. And this one, I did actually kind of like visually. It's pretty similar to, or almost identical, I should say, to the other one. Like this version here is exactly the same from the street as the one that I kind of like. Um, Again, just looks like one cohesive house project, an actual single building. But this one doesn't have the space in behind, right? So it's obviously back here. It's lacking that second floor addition. Um, when you look at the roof plan, again, it's pretty effective. You do have those valleys, which whatever you can deal with those. But you're shedding rainwater off. You're shedding off the snow. You're keeping half of the existing roof. You can make it work. So if money was getting tight, this was kind of a nice plan B, and what the most cost-effective approach. And it would be because you're effectively limiting half of the second floor. You're doing less roof work. So if he needed the cheap version, this was kind of my suggestion on the way to go. So that's what I presented to my neighbor, and I said, "Hey, these are what 1, 2, 3, 4. Whoops, we lost it. Well, I spoiled it there. Don't look ahead. 5, 6 different options, and I just said like these are just ways to think about your project. You can mix and match, and you can combine, and you can approach this in different ways. But at least this gives you a starting point to say, hey, these are jumping off points, and it just my objective in sending this to him was saying, hey, these are some ideas, and you can take it, you can run with it, put your own spin on it. But these are just some ideas that you may not have come up with on your own. I mean, none of it's rocket science, but just to say, hey, these are some possibilities that I came up with. There's others, I'm sure, but as a jumping off point, here you go. So he did end up hiring someone, and this was what they came back with first. And I saw this, and I just about died because this, first of all, it was none of those options that I just showed. Um, and this is super ineffective. Like, what is this? What is this valley here? This is not good at all because we're talking about if we were to draw this in like a roof plan of this, right? This is your existing house. It'd be loosey goosey. Sloping this way, sloping this way. And whatever, there's an addition on the back here, something like this, whatever. It's sloping out this way. With this design that they got from this person, this is your addition. They just basically stuck a new house on the side of the house and sloped it right into the existing house. This is a problem. This this side of the roof sloping into the existing house is a problem. We're talking about these valleys before and how they can build up water and ice, and you can have ice damming, which will eventually lead to leaks. That's what this whole center valley is so problematic because you have water. Just delete those and keep those two arrows. You have water flowing this way. We're going this way. And you got water going straight into it this way. There's nowhere for it to go. It hits that valley and then it's got to run like all the way out this way or all the way out this way. And this is that's a red zone for leaks. I would not build a house like this. I think that's a terrible idea. Um, and visually, just from the front, I don't love it either. I don't know, like it's clearly an addition on the on the house, right? Like, I don't know. It's like, oh, this is clearly the original, and we just stuck this on the side. And I mean, that's fine. It has to function. Maybe that the function's more important than how it looks. But if you can solve both at the same time, like make it look good while functioning. So I just this doesn't do either. This doesn't function and it doesn't look good. I kind of hate it. So it's functional in that you get your two stories. You get your second floor, and you have your first floor with the garage. You have lots of floor space. You are limiting the amount of work you're doing on the existing house because you're literally just slapping something on the side of that. Um, but I guarantee you're going to have a leak in your roof. I guarantee it. Luckily, this was an early iteration of this project. They came back with a couple more designs, and here we are. This is what they ultimately ended up with, and it is now built. And it's a bit of a hybrid, actually, right? From the front, zoom right in here. I'd say it still looks like an addition. I don't think they solved that problem. They did a really nice job. He actually put the stone on himself, or maybe it was his father-in-law. Somebody in the family put the stone on. He definitely helped. Um, Stone looks great. But this is still very clearly an addition, right? They did a decent job tying it in terms of like matching trim and things like that. Because we got black fascia on the front over here, we got black fascia here. It looks like they maybe either redid the windows or probably just painted the frames. I think so. It's all black, so it does match. It doesn't look too bad in terms of an addition, but I don't know. The roof is it's improved, right? Because they don't have the gable anymore, so they eliminated that problem. So they did sort of recognize their own error and say, "Hey, maybe this is not something we should do." So they did get rid of that. It's tough to see what they did from this angle, but if we go to this other view here, you can kind of see. Um, and it was basically a almost a version of one of the ideas I gave him. So we have a gable kind of facing this way, and then it looks like on the back there's a gable going 90 degrees to that. So this gives you a pretty good sense of what is actually happening there, and it's pretty close to it's close to this, just a much shallower slope, right? But it's also or maybe that was the one. Yeah, I guess that's pretty. No, there's another version that's closer to. Not that one. Maybe not that one. Not that one. Yeah, I guess it is. It's basically this one. Um, with a little. Yeah, no, it's very close to this actually. So, because this part here is basically what we've shown. They've changed this little back section a little bit, and they basically put another peak in here so that the sides slope off this way. Meanwhile, the front and back slope this way, but very at a very shallow angle. Um, and that's I think to really maintain the two stories at this sort of back portion here. Right, so that's kind of what the roof plan would look like, and you can see it if we just go back here. Very shallow gable that's, sloping to the front and the back, and then at 90 degrees with a ridge going this way, and then they slope out to the side this way, and then I'm assuming that from the top it would kind of slope out the other way too. So that's what they ended up going with. Don't hate it, but I mean, I've seen better. I don't know. It's fine. I think function was the important thing. And when you compare the two side by side, I mean, this is a huge improvement from what they had, right? Not only in terms of looks, like this looks a little dated for sure, a little tired, a little worn out, a little small, and that's the big thing. When you compare the two, I mean, the garage takes up a huge portion of this, probably half of the main floor of this addition. But when you figure out, what's the square footage of that rear addition plus this whole second story, I mean, you probably you probably added at least 50% of the existing floor space to this. So, huge addition in terms of the functionality and living space for this family of like 7 people living in this tiny, tiny little house. So, ultimately, I think it was a success for the family, certainly. They got to stay in their house, they got to stay there during the renovation. They clearly stayed on budget because they got it done. I know he did a lot of the work himself, so props to him for that. And I like that they upgraded the existing facade there too, right, at the same time. So um, they didn't just have like a brand new addition with a very old, tired brick building beside it, and they managed to kind of update them at the same time. So, anyway, I thought I'd just walk you through that one. It's kind of a fun little project that I wasn't really involved in, except for this early kind of idea generation concept phase. So, and that's just a nice little way to show how I might walk through a project, right? We look at the existing condition. Um, Next step from that, you sort of figure out what you're dealing with, start to model it, simplify it, see what you can keep, what you can give away, and then you start coming up with your ideas and the pros and cons of each, right? There's not necessarily a better version of these 6 ideas, and there's probably 20 different ways to do this. But as we saw, because they did sort of a hybrid version of about 2 of these designs. So anyway, you look at the existing condition, you start to measure it out, see what you're dealing with. You come up with some ideas. You weigh those ideas with some pros, with some cons, pricing, functionality, what works, what doesn't work, what looks good, what doesn't look good, um, and then you push one of those ideas forward. Maybe you don't love it right away. You tweak it a little bit, and then you end up with your final result. And sometimes that takes a handful of tweaks and different design changes along the way. But a fun little project that I thought I'd walk you through. Hopefully you learned something. If you're doing an addition, maybe this is helpful. Um, Maybe you think about your project in a different way. And that's all I wanted to do is just you should open your eyes to the possibilities. If you're putting this much money into your house, and you're going to live there for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, you want to do it right. You know what I mean? You don't want to regret this. You spend a ton of money and have to live there and regret the choices you make. So the more time that you spend up front in this idea generation phase, um, it's easy to change things at this point when you're working on paper and digitally, as opposed to when you have things built on site. Things cost way more to change. So think about your ideas up front, weigh the pros and cons, and talk to an architect. They'll give you some ideas, hopefully, and pay them for it. I did this one for him as a favor, but no one likes to work for free. But anyway, talk to your architect, get some ideas, go from there, and best of luck with your project. So thanks for watching. Give it a thumbs up if it was helpful. Subscribe if you're into architecture videos and want to see more of this kind of content. And we'll see you in the next one. Cheers. Bye for now.